Hey, this is Bobby Salverson. Welcome back to another episode of the Hazmat Guys. Let's get into it.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode. We are dealing with episode 42, a continuation from last week, where we're going to be talking and walking through some of the techniques for grounding and bonding.
Yep.
We are the premier podcast dealing with hazardous materials response for the fire responder, where we're going to give you the knowledge and the insight to do your job safely and effectively. I'm Michael Monaco, glad as always to be here with my co-host Bob Salverson. Hey Bob, how's it going?
Indeed, it is a great day, morning, evening, whatever.
It is beautiful night. Stars are out. Moon shining.
Indeed. All right. Without further ado, let's just get back into this episode and finish this up strong. Right.
The NFPA, obviously, it's the National Fire Protection Agency, got involved with this whole thing, and they addressed the need for grounding and bonding in, I believe it's NFPA 30, which is the Flammable and the Combustible Code. In the 2015 edition of NFPA 30, Chapter 18, Part 5.2.2, it states that the means must be provided to minimize the generation of static electricity when transferring flammable liquids.
Mm-hmm.
But NFPA 77 recommends practice on static electricity.
That's what it
that's
is.
That's the title,
recommended
right.
practice.
Recommended practice, not recommending that you practice. All right,
that'd be helpful.
It covers the very fundamental principles of effectively managing a static environment.
So in 30, they tell you what you need to do, and in 77, they're telling you how to do it.
Right.
Sounds like, you know. And just remember, the NFPA gives suggestions, strongly worded suggestions, but suggestions nonetheless.
Right.
OSHA is the guys that write the laws and can give you tickets and whatnot. So,
and those suggestions are so strong that you better have a really damn good reason for not following them.
You got to be good. In the 2014 version of NFPA 77, the recommended practice on static electricity, they adjusted some things that makes it, I think, a lot better for us. And they now recommend that a resistance of less than 1,000 ohms or 1 kilo ohm. Did you see that? I moved the decimal 3 points. That was so cool. Slick.
That was like 1, 2, 3, 1.
1 kilo ohm is acceptable for a temporary emergency grounding field at a hazmat scene, a.k.a. what we do. We're not engineering stuff. We're not building a loading dock for MC 406s, DOT 406s, where they would need to adhere to those very low standards. We are doing a emergency transfer from a cow tank to, which is the bad tank to the good tank, and then we're done. It's Miller time.
And somebody correct me if we have an electrician. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was told this by another electrician. So that the 25 ohms. When they started when the NFPA started this whole grounding and bonding thing, they said, well, what should we use? Yep. They turned to the National Electric Code, and the National Electric Code for like a house or a building is 25 ohms, which in the grand scheme of ohms is really, really small. That's a lot of surface area for electrons to flow, right?
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Right. 25 is a lot. So it's enough to dissipate a lightning strike, which was really where the whole 25 ohms came from, is that you needed enough to be able to dissipate a lightning strike from a building. We're not dealing with lightning.
No.
We're dealing with minor static buildup. Yeah, the static buildup is enough to generate a spark, but certainly not enough to even electrocute a person.
No.
Nevertheless, even feel the electrons being transferred. So in NFPA, all right, in 7.4.1.3.1.1, try to remember that. If you can't, that's fine. In a field-based situation, such as like a hazmat or a hazardous materials response operation, or like a flammable or combustible material spill and transfer, it might be necessary to establish a temporary or emergency grounding system in a remote location in order to dissipate static charges. Mm-hmm. In such situations, various types of conducting ground electrodes can be used, such as rods, plates, wires, and they are sometimes used in combination to increase the surface area with the earth. So that means you don't just have to choose one or the other. You can do whatever it takes to get this goal. All right. The purpose of this is to create a temporary grounding system to dissipate static electricity with a total resistance, like Bob said, of 1 kilo ohm, which is about 1,000 ohms. All right. They considered this enough to be a pathway for the electrons to go from the scene to the earth, and it is completely adequate. So this is where now we're gonna talk a little bit about the testing. Like, how do we know we're at 1,000 ohms? And we'll chat about that in a little bit.
Okay. What about OSHA, Mike?
Ooh, OSHA.
They always get into this. They get into the scuffle a lot.
They do. Well, like you said, NFPA was what?
They are the recommended guy. Come on, bro. This is a guideline. This is a guy.
The OSHA, right? All right. So like NFPA is kind of like the security guard, right? And OSHA is kind of like the police. Where when OSHA gets on scene, right? NFPA is like and OSHA's like, step back.
Yeah.
This is my territory.
Back up, punk.
All right. OSHA requirements for grounding and bonding in general industry are referenced in their flammable liquid section, which, if you wanted to read it up, is 29 CFR 1910.106 E6II.
Indeed. And the regulation states, this is actually, I was a little impressed by this, but the regulation states that Category 1 or Category 2 flammable liquids or Category 3 flammable liquids, you see that difference? There is no difference, actually. I copied this right out of the book. With a flash point of below 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 37.8 degrees Celsius shall not be dispensed into containers unless the nozzle and the container are electrically connected. Where the metallic floor plate on which the container stands while filling the electrically connected system, or where the stem is bonded to the container during filling operations by means of a bond wire, the provisions of the sections shall be deemed with and complied with. Now, what that means is that when we go to the gas station to fill it up with some petrol, right, we have to have the nozzle actually in contact with the container, a.k.a. we're bonding, and we're supposed to have that container and the pump on a electrically grounded site. So there, now I can speak for myself. I have never seen an electric grounding plate at my gas station. I have a concrete pad. But they're saying that because the pump is, now this is local code, they're saying that because the pump is grounded out flatly, that if there was any static buildup in the 5-gallon bucket for my lawnmower, it's going to conduct into the hose. The hose is connected to the pump is going to connect it to the ground, and we're good. That's how they're doing it.
Which kind of makes sense. If I am not mistaken, the nozzles on those are either plastic with a wire that wraps around them that touches the metal of your accepting port in your car, or they're actually metal themselves. Yeah,
they have to be. And then the hose itself has wires running through it to ground everything.
Right. So this means that any of the containers that are holding a Category 1, 2, or 3, which are liquids with a flash point lower than 100, need to be grounded and bonded during dispensing operations.
All right, so let's get into how we do this now. So when we are establishing a ground field, again, we're trying to get everything down to zero. Us as technicians are trained to test the ground resistance using a ground earth resistance meter, which we commonly call the MEGGER, the MEGGER.
Yes. For bonding and grounding to be effective, a metal-to-metal connection must be maintained between the bonding and the grounding wires and the containers. So everything is it is literally electrically connected.
Right. And static electricity is generated through the movement from one container to the other, just by flowing through a hose. So by the hazmat responder providing a method of grounding and bonding, two different terms, he can remove 3 of the 4 conditions for ignition.
Right. A means to generate a spark. Continual flow of the product will increase static charge over time. So removing this accumulation lessens the ability to generate a spark at any given point in time.
Another one we can dissipate, this is point 2, is enough static charge to bridge the gap By grounding all the transfer appliances and containers, this reduces the total amount of availability to bridge the gap, thus eliminating the charge to create a spark. When we were saying before that sparks are dependent on the amount of electric built up, right? If I say, okay, well, I have 1,000 volts and I'm making this up, and I go closer and closer and closer to that doorknob, eventually I'm going to have enough potential to bridge the gap. Where you look at a lightning strike, this is up miles and it has so much potential, it bridges a couple of miles to bridge that gap. Talk about potentials, difference of potentials. Let's take a break so we could drop our Hazmat Nugget into the pop-up pool of knowledge. This is a suggested drill activity for our listeners. This Hazmat Nugget is brought to you by hazsim.com. Dangerous jobs require hands-on interactive training.
On today's Nugget, we're going to be diving just a little bit into the world of sampling. Specifically, I want to talk about sampling a drum, in which we are going to take a tube, bring it down into the drum, and pull out and try to get a layered type effect. A lot of times when we do this, we're going to be using a kalawaska tube, and there are some difficulties that I find doing this. So before you go and do this on scene, please attempt practicing this in the firehouse or back at the station. One of the biggest things that I found with the kalawaska tubes is that they are often ordered too thick. So they are too wide, their diameter, their radius is too big. So when you put your finger over the kalawaska tube as you're pulling it out of the drum, the fluid ends up coming out anyway. Air is able to get into the tube and everything that you worked for is down. So what I recommend are the tubes that are about an 1/8 inch thick, that have an 8 inch diameter within the circle. This is just enough space to keep the liquid in the tube and no air gets in. So if you have kalawaska tubes at the firehouse, or even if you just have plastic tubes or the glass tubes, whatever tubes that you have that you're going to try to pull a sample from using this technique, try it in the firehouse first. You may be surprised that you're going to need smaller, not bigger. That's been your Hazmat Nugget.
To sponsor this segment or any other part of the show, please drop us an email at info@thehazmatguys.com.
Then the third thing that we're eliminating is a spark with enough ignition energy. So grounding and bonding reduces this ignition energy and keeps it below its peak sparking level.
Yeah, and or even just the flammable atmospheres, right?
Right, like weather?
But well, I mean, just like flammable atmospheres as far as a flammable liquid, and keeping the vapors under control and not getting them in the potential area of a spark production.
Sure. And what do we have to measure whether or not we have a flammable atmosphere?
Oh, wait, don't tell me.
We've got something somewhere.
I don't know. We'll come back to that.
Right. But it's a good idea if you can figure out what it is that can measure a flammable atmosphere to keep it with you while you're doing this process.
This would be very important.
Yeah, because if you have, we're going to talk about the procedure in a little bit, but when you are actually connecting all these pieces together, keep this flammable atmospheric monitoring device with you. That way, as you're making connections, you can say, yeah, I'm doing this in an area that's not going to blow up. Just
very good idea.
A little tidbit. Does the actual weather itself change anything?
Yes. And I got this under good advice, is that colder means more static. So if you live in a colder climate, then you have the more potential to have a static creation, I guess, the potential.
Yes, and I can tell you this from my own personal experience. In the wintertime, I pretty much curse every time I get out of my vehicle because it generates, I don't know why my pickup truck generates so much static electricity, but every time I get out and then touch the door, I get zapped, and I let out a little yelp and a curse every time. And it only happens in the wintertime, generally like January, February. All right. What also happens? What's up?
It's a science experiment. They're testing you.
It is. No, really, somebody's screwing with me all the time. When we have humidity less than 33%, it will generate 20 times more static than when it's 65%. and about 300 times more when the humidity is 20%.
Wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot. So generally it's drier in the wintertime. So this is where the whole, we get more static in the cold.
And this is where I'm going to probably put my foot in my mouth, because we here in where we work in New York City, we rarely ground and bond. It's not because we don't have plans, but because we are living in a generally warmer, more humid area, and therefore our potentials are much lower than our friend, let's say Jay-Z out in Phoenix, who is living out, in Phoenix, it's a dry heat. So, they're dealing with super low humidities, super low cooling at night, and they have that so they are dealing with extreme potentials. Talk about grounding and bonding out there is Bible. Out by us, rarely done.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we would do it. I mean, we have done it when we do like big product transfers, but for things like drums and, pumping gasoline out of a car, and this isn't, I don't want anyone to think that it's for laziness, although a lot of the things I do are out of laziness. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we had these meters, this mega meter, for a long time. And we literally tested all different scenarios on the roadway, on the dirt, if I have the drum on the concrete, if I have the drum on this. We've tested so many scenarios, and there was almost never a time that during basic, like filling up a drum with gasoline type stuff, we weren't hitting the ohms that were required, to do the operation.
With no grounding and bonding.
Right, with no grounding and bonding. Everything was within the limits. So, get one of these meters, test out what your different potentials are. Because you may be surprised how quickly you can reach 1,000 kilo ohms. What is going to be our actual procedure? Since we talked about what we need to do and why we need to do it, let's actually talk about how we make all these different connections.
And one of the biggest things that we talk about all the time is the order of connections. But before we get into that, we have to make the actual connection. So what we want to do is we want to actually connect to welded material. But welded metals, all right?
Metals.
Well, it doesn't really have to be metals. I mean, we can be connecting to the outside of a poly drum or something like that, or unpainted or unoxidized metal. And what I mean by oxidized, no rust. So if you got rust, scrape it off, or somehow, and again, we might be in a flammable atmosphere. You're going to have to get fancy with this. A lot of the grounding clips that we use are kind of like springy pliers that have pointy tips. Mm-hmm. And when you clip it on the metal, all you got to do is go back and forth once or twice by twisting it, and it will dig those teeth right into the fresh metal. That's what you want to do, because oxidized paint all are insulators, and they're going to prevent. So it can be the most beautiful grounding and bonding scheme ever devised, and it will be useless because nothing's connected.
Right, and even on things that look like it's pure metal, you want to do what Bob said and give that a good scraping, because things like aluminum, aluminum oxides or reacts with oxygen almost immediately and creates a barrier, and right. It doesn't look like rust. Like you think rust, you think that reddish material and stuff flaking off, but aluminum oxide is almost just as shiny as the regular aluminum. So even if it's unpainted, you want to give that a good dig. You want to make sure that you have real, true metal-to-metal contact. And we don't want to do things like bolts, bumpers, jackets, and strappings. We want to connect as best we can to the actual tank itself.
All right, so here's how we do it. We go from bad to ground. Now, I mean that in that specific order. We actually take the bundle of wire, we walk up to the bad tank, and we connect it first. Then we go back to ground and do it there. And there's a reason why we do this, because what happens if I took my ground, which is 0, and I walk up to my bad tank and it has a potential of 20, and I'm making up that number, and I connect it, and it has just before I touch that thing, I get that little spark. That's all I need. So if I go up with my bundle of wire and I connect it to my bad tank, I have my wire instantly goes to 20. I walk back to ground, I get that spark there, but I'm out of that flammable range. All is well.
Yeah, and there are things that we can do. Again, just as a reminder, you want to always keep that uh, flammability meter with you, because as you connect, you never know. You yourself may be creating like this awesome ground,
Right.
and you're going to create some kind of a spark. So always try to keep that with you. Then
Right.
what we want to do is we want to connect the good to the ground. So we're doing the exact same method, right? We're walking over to the good, we're connecting it, and then we're walking that wire away and putting it to the ground.
Right. And then we're going to take the bad. Now we've just completed our grounding scheme. We've done tank to ground, and now we're going to bond. So we're going to bond our two tanks together, and we're going to go bad to good. So we are going to, again, take our possible potential difference. Now, this is all relaxing at the same time. We clip onto the bad one, and we walk it over to the good one, because there's less of a probability of the flammable atmosphere being on the good one than there is on the bad one. And that's why we do it in that order.
So one of the things that they teach, if you go away to any of these schools, especially if you're in like an arid, dry area, is improving your grounding field, okay? So let's say we're on a roadway. Let's say we're doing something where we can't get a really good ground. And like we said, we highly recommend you guys getting the meter and testing beforehand. Yes, you always technically want to test, before you actually do the operation, but you want to have a really good idea that a plan, or if you have to think outside the box, is going to work. So a grounding field is just really a fancy way of saying a bunch of metal rods that we bury in the ground and dump the static into. So what are some of the ways that we can increase this?
Well, as we said before, we can use salt. We want to increase the, I don't want to say the contaminants, but the impurities in water to increase, the minerals, to to increase the conductivity of water.
Right. Speedy Dry is really good for this, right? If you do Speedy Dry
Really?
in water, for some reason, I guess the Speedy Dry's got some minerals in it that it releases into the but it's almost, from what we were measuring, it's not nearly as good as salt, but it does dramatically improve.
I did not know that.
The water, yeah. And one of the things that we can do is to go deeper. And generally, when you go deeper, it's a little bit moister and wetter the further down you go. So
Right.
you're really just allowing for more surface area to make contact.
Okay. All right. Well, then, or you can use more metal and make the field bigger. So there's nothing saying I can only use one rod. I mean, if I can jam 5 or 6 rods in that hole, then I will.
Yeah.
And with the water, it should slide in pretty easy.
And we've got, remember, for every rod that you use, you decrease your resistance by about 40%. And there's another thing that I want to talk about for those of you that are in big cities, like we're in New York, right? And a lot of times we can't dig into earth. We can't do things like that. So we turned around and we said, well, what can we ground and bond to? This was like a whole summer we did this. Like literally, it was like a 3-month venture. We had the meter. Everywhere we went, we said, if we had a leak, what could we ground to? And think outside the box. So we started doing things like grounding the fire hydrants, which happens to be interconnected to every other fire hydrant, plus it's water, plus it's deep within the earth, and it's wet. So it worked like a charm. Mm-hmm. We did the metal barriers on the side of the highway. All right, those are buried into the ground. So you have a fantastic grounding field right there. Metal fences that are buried in the ground made excellent grounding field rods. So there's all sorts of things around you. We even tied in to, we took apart, and I don't recommend you doing this. This is just something that we did. All right, I don't advocate taking apart electrical systems if you don't know what you're doing. But we took apart the grounding, the actual ground to a light post, and we connected to the ground. Again, it worked fantastically. We had all the ohms that we needed to do the thing. So take a look around, go out, and see on an out-of-the-box situation, what can I connect to, what can I ground to, and test it through various locations. That way, if you're ever in the situation where you need an out-of-the-box grounding and bonding method, you have something that you can pull from. Well, you gone and done it again. Another half hour of your life wasted away. That's going to wrap up another episode of the Hazmat Guys. Thanks for taking a little bit of your day to listen to us, and hopefully we made your job just a little bit easier.
Yeah. If you want to call us on our hotline, it's 843-628-1484. That's 843-6 the Matt. I don't even know what the hell I'm saying anymore.
That's okay. For those of you who are watching us live, there's no need to repeat this, but we are recording our shows and producing a live and unedited version of the show that's going to go up on YouTube every week. So if you want to find out some more information about us, go on to Google Plus and Google Plus like us, however that works, and it'll send you notifications as to when we're going to be live on air.
All right. Well, don't just get on the job. Get into the job.